Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Detecting Threats in Oracle ERP Cloud. I'm delighted to be joined by veteran industry experts today from ERP Risk Advisors, Hare and Donna Curtis, along with SafePaaS CEO Adil Khan. So just a few housekeeping items before we jump into the session. The session will be recorded for on-demand viewing, and all attendees are on mute. We'll hopefully leave some time at the end of this session for Q&A, so feel free to pop over those questions in the control panel for our speakers. This is the agenda we'll be following today, so we'll start off with some very brief introductions for those of you who don't know us, followed by our top 5 threats and solutions. And please do stick around until the end, as we do have a complimentary offering for all attendees today. So let's dive right in. Jeff?
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Hare. I am CEO and founder of ERP Risk Advisors. ERP Risk Advisors is a risk content company. Look and feel a lot like a risk advisory firm, but we have some proprietary methodologies in around implementing and evaluating security and access controls. We can get into that a little bit later, but ERP Armor, rules, roles, reports, and learning. Lots of learning for companies that are interested in as well on the administrative side and the audit side. So excited for the topic today, and I'll turn it over to Donna to introduce herself.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was introducing myself. I was on mute. Do I have a slide or no? I'm Donna Curtis. I've been working with Oracle for about 20-some, well, I won't date myself, 20-some years. I'm working with cloud for about 7-8 years now. My area of expertise is role design and controls and whatever Jeff tells me he needs me to do. So yeah, that's who I am.
Thanks for that, Donna. And Adil, SafePaaS, who is SafePaaS?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff and Donna, for introducing yourself. I'm Adil Khan, founder CEO at SafePaaS. We're really delighted to have a great panel today and all of you attending. So yeah, I mean, most of you follow us, so you know SafePaaS. But my personal experience, I've written a book called Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook for Oracle Applications many years ago now, almost a decade ago, and been involved with Jeff for many years and Oracle user groups and so forth. You know, just communicating. You know, the importance of internal controls, governance, since really 2002, since Sarbanes-Oxley. My background is in finance and technology, enterprise technology, specifically around Oracle. So yeah, obviously Oracle Cloud is a really important topic for our customers. SafePaaS provides you know, a platform that helps you govern access across Oracle and all other major parts of your organization, infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, databases, provisioning systems, ITSM systems, you know, so we go across the enterprise, and that's our mission, is to help customers govern their enterprise better to reduce risk, and most importantly, audit findings, those annoying audit findings that take up a lot of your time. We're recognized by Gartner as one of the most complete platforms. We work with all the major audit firms that are external auditors that review our results from SafePaaS and rely on those results. We have over 6 million users that we monitor on our single platform. I think that makes us the most widely used platform for monitoring access for ERP systems in the market.
Great, so let's dive into the session, which is why everybody is here today. So top threat number 1, access risk. Jeff.
All right, well, my favorite topic, we've been talking about this topic for a long time, since kind of the beginning of Sarbanes-Oxley. Like Adil said, we've been around for a long time in this space, and the interesting thing about kind of the looking at access control risks is the lack of maturity, I think, in some respects of where the the auditors and the implementers on the SI side sit related to this in terms of maturity, and there's a lot of aspects of things haven't matured as much as we would like to think they should be. 20, or I guess we're going on almost 20 years now since the onset of Sarbanes-Oxley. So we typically see a lot of emphasis on segregation duties conflicts, and those are what I traditionally think of as compliance risks. So it's looking at the separation of something like the enter of POs and enter of goods receipts, or the entry of journals and the approval of journals. And those are all really important things to look at from a compliance perspective. In modern ERP systems like ERP Cloud, what we're seeing is a lot more automation of those separation through workflow processes. So if you're coming off of, like I say, PeopleSoft or JD Edwards or eBusiness Suite, or another kind of legacy on-prem solution, you're finding a lot more automation in ERP Cloud, and that's a lot of the value companies are getting out of implementing ERP and ERP applications and new SaaS applications. So a lot of the reality is a lot of traditional SOD conflicts are remediated or mitigated through the implementation of workflow. And of course, you have to evaluate the design of the workflow processes. You've got to do your walkthrough and evaluate the configurations. And there are cases where systems can be implemented to allow somebody to enter and approve their own transaction, whether it's a journal entry or a purchase order or an AP invoice. So there does require a validation of those segregation duties, those mitigating controls we talked about via workflow. So in many respects, I mean, although you have to really validate, and they're very important from a compliance perspective, they're less of what we do today compared to what we were doing 10 or 15 years ago, is focusing on segregation duties. A lot of what we do is look at sensitive access risks. And sensitive access risks give the ability to be able to look at risk across all roles and for all users. So like we would look at who has the ability to enter and maintain purchase orders, or the ability to enter and maintain vendor master maintenance. And we're going to do that through a sensitive access risk evaluation. And traditionally, if you're thinking about somebody that has an SOD conflict, enter POs and enter goods receipts, you're ultimately normally going to remediate one side or the other. You're going to either remediate the enter PO side or the goods receipt side to be able to relieve the SOD conflict. So when we take an approach with our clients, we do look at those sensitive access risks independent of and really prior to looking at SOD conflicts. So like, for example, if somebody has vendor master maintenance that shouldn't, and they have vendor master maintenance and AP invoices, or vendor master maintenance and POs, if we look at enter vendor master maintenance, we're going to identify that there's people that potentially have unauthorized access to vendor master maintenance. So that's how we go by a lot of engagements. We say that we're a sensitive access risk organization first, and a SOD conflict organization second. We have to get to SOD for sure, but we're solving most issues. And a lot of times what we identify through sensitive access risks is ineffective role design. So we're finding, like in ERP Cloud, there are lots of abilities within seated roles that provide end users access to do things that they shouldn't, and those can only really be identified through a sensitive access assessment and a very broad risk library, like our ERP Armor risk library for evaluating sensitive access roles. The one challenge that lots of organizations have is the ongoing patch process, and Oracle continued to add risk and add new functionality into the application. So that's one of the challenges organizations have, is just making sure that they consider that in their quarterly patch process. And they have a tool like SafePaaS tool to be able to evaluate SOD and sensitive access risk, and they can do that proactively during the quarterly patch process. And you really want to stay current with the risks being introduced. We're going to talk about, if we have time at the end of this session, a couple of new risks that Oracle introduced in 23A. Donna has done some research on those, and we look for those kind of new things on an ongoing basis as the patches come out. So we've already looked at 23A and have some comments on that. So you'll want to make sure that you have not only a tool to evaluate those risks throughout the quarter, but during the quarterly patch process. And the ideal scenario is to get updates, either do that internally, or you can rely upon a company like ours that does that for a living. And we're constantly looking and scanning for those and getting feedback from our customers on what they're seeing as well, so we can update those rules and engines. So if you're already using SafePaaS, that may be an enhancement for you. Or if you haven't and you're wanting to implement a tool, you can implement the SafePaaS platform and work with us to be able to put a program in place to be able to evaluate on a one-time basis, and a program that does it on a proactive basis, as we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this. Privileged access risk, we kind of combine privileged access risk and sensitive access risk in many respects in the same assessment. They are looking at who has privileged access risk, I guess, from an audit perspective, thinking more about the context of who has elevated access or administrative access. Certainly that's the case that for non-SaaS applications, you're looking at who has OS access or database role access. But there are definitely some privileged access elements within the application tier, and that's frankly, it's kind of an art to define that. We probably extend that more broadly than most organizations do, because risk is risk. And so what we're trying to do through the privileged access assessment is make sure we've got a pretty good comprehensive understanding of who have the ability to override controls and who would be considered administrative access. So those abilities are found in a lot of the implementation roles, like the application implementation consultant role, the HCM implementation roles as well. So those are definitely things you want to restrict. And frankly, the challenge that lots of organizations have is the SI doesn't always guide their organizations through a good process of evaluating what those risks are going to be, or how they're going to be managed after go live. And so a lot of SIs will come in assuming that they're going to have full access to highly privileged roles like the AIC role, the application implementation consultant role. So management really needs to, as part of the process of designing controls, they need to design and define what they view as privileged access. And then often what we're seeing is a revalidation of users with those privileged access risks as part of the user recertification process on a monthly basis, as opposed to looking at the rest of the user population on a quarterly basis. So those are kind of a brief high-level summary of access control risks. I know that Adil is going to share some information on how SafePaaS can be used to evaluate and mitigate these risks.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. There's a great oversight on where to start your program. And so once you start with an expert like Jeff is, for many years we worked together, as I said before, you'll get a list of basically key risk, essentially a risk assessment, right? So you'll know in your business by process. Jeff mentioned many of the key processes at the activity level, but if you think about your major significant processes that support your business, record to report, source to pay, order to cash, etc., hire to retire, each of these processes have risks. And where SafePaaS comes in is working with experts like Jeff is to basically help you control that risk on a sustainable basis, right? Whether it's segregation of duties, privilege access, or sensitive access, we have the ability to create rules within the system. So we'll take the content that Jeff's talking about that his company provides, and I would strongly recommend looking at that because you can spend 5 man-years building some of this content. It's a very detailed process because you got to go down the privilege level. You got to understand the risk level for your company. So you start with that. We have the ability to take the content that Jeff has put together, or if you have content already that you want to start with, those are called access rules, right? So we'll pull in those rules for sensitive access, privilege access, and segregation of duties, and basically create a test environment. We'll take a snapshot of a picture essentially of your current security configurations. We also support many security models. So cloud is a unique security model with inherited risks as well. So you have to be really careful that the tools you're using are not ignoring some of those inherited privileges. That's something our customers have run into with some of the previous work they've done in this area and have ended up with findings. So you really need to, when it comes to cloud ERP, it's very different than e-business suite. Now we do support e-business and all the family of Oracle products, so not just limited to cloud ERP. That's our focus today. So that ability you're seeing in the first swim lane on the top box there, application security model, that's what that means. We can take a hierarchical or linear or more complex network security model and program that, configure that. For all the tier 1 applications, pre-configured. But if you have a homegrown application, we configure that. We pull in the rules from Jeff, map them into your environment, and then run a snapshot of your current security settings. And basically, that's the starting point of your control environment testing, right? So that takes sometimes quick, a week, sometimes longer, a couple of weeks, depends on how complex your environment is. And then we basically run through the SOD analysis or sensitive access analysis against whatever policies you have, right? And it spits out the violations. And then you have analytics capabilities within the platforms instead of taking it down on very long spreadsheets. I've seen, and Jeff and I started that way, looking at spreadsheets and trying to, go through a million core lines of code because you have a permutation problem with these complex security models. So a user may have access to many privileges through many roles, and that creates the number of iterations through which, or paths, if you will, through which a user can violate a policy. And that creates some anxiety for folks that are responsible for remediation. So we provide the analytics to help quickly, for example, take out the false positives. Let's say one of your business units is not currently in scope. You could do it as a separate test. I mean, obviously you care about all risk, but not all risk is equal. So you can look at your high risk items, your mid-range at risk, low risk, and segregate that risk out by violations, right? So you can slice and dice the violation through analysis. We also provide you the ability to validate that your security configurations are right. Often I hear from customers when they first look at results is that, hey, we don't think we had that problem. Why are these users showing up? They're, for example, implementation folks, we didn't think they were going to get access to suppliers. But voila, the first time you run it, you see that 100 people from your SI around the globe can have access to your supplier bank accounts, right? So those are the kind of surprises that may come up when you first run the analysis, and you can validate that within our platform. So we provide you all the security reports. You can see the hierarchies in a more organized way because we come from that controls and governance perspective. So we will give you all the level of detail that you sometimes don't get from the ERP system. Specifically, Oracle Cloud has great reporting, but not the reporting from an audit perspective, right? So we provide you that audit level reporting, and then you can apply corrective actions to really the areas where the risk is unacceptable. You cannot tolerate the risk. You may accept some risk, right? Because you have compensating controls, or you just have business constraints where you're forced to accept the risk and you have a negotiation with your audit. So there's a lot of flavors of risk remediation that I won't have time to get into here, but Emma can talk to you more about it through a demo, or we'll set up a demo for you. But yeah, so there's global false positives, there are exceptions because of IT controls you may have in place, there may be business constraints, and what's left over is really the corrective actions. And the corrective actions are also, can be overwhelming if you try to do it in a spreadsheet, because you're passing the spreadsheets full of errors, and you may take away access from someone that's super productive and they can't do their job anymore. So it needs to be really organized. So what we have done is build workflows around all that, and we can assign, basically divide and conquer that problem by assigning out the corrective action responsibility to multiple owners of those activities or roles within your organization. So for example, if you're in the payables team and you're the head of the payables team, or process owner as we call it, you might get all the payable clerks and the payable supervisors across the globe if you're a global company, or in your department for a local company. And then you'll be able to see, okay, I want George to be able to pay the invoices, but not to create those invoices or approve them. And I want Mary to do that. So you'll be able to kind of do that in a simple bite-sized effort. If you're a global company and you're spread out many business units, you can see that divide and conquer really works well through workflows. And so it speeds up your process and you can stay compliant, you can govern your enterprise better. And then your IT folks that are responsible, or your partners, in many cases, managed service providers, that are responsible for remediation or changing the roles themselves, they can also use roles tools that we have for simulating the changes, verifying that it's functionally useful, and also protect you against the policy violations without ever having to touch your ERP system. We are all under extensive SDLC controls right now and have been for many years, especially with cloud, with all the cloning that has to happen every quarter with the patching. So it's pretty tedious to just throw out a change into a role straight into prod, and I know no customer does that, but even that SDLC cycle puts, I've seen an average about 6 weeks of delay in when you decide that you want to make a change to when the users are actually using that change to reduce the risk. And you have a quarter window to do all that work. So you can imagine the pressure our customers face. And by using this, you can really narrow down that 6 weeks into a few hours. And just if you extrapolate that, you can calculate the ROI yourself, but it's definitely north of 300% or more, right? So that's where the value we bring in is to help you streamline that process by taking the expertise that Jeff has, the technology that you have, and combining them into a process that is more sustainable, which you can monitor, and your control owners can be confident that the financial statements and disclosure, as well as their operations, are working in a manner that can be governed and aligned with your governance policies. Jeff?
Top threat number 2, insider threats. Jeff?
Yeah, I think great summarization of how technology can be of value to an organization, and I like how you tied in the challenge of the change management process, and just as most people would probably come to logical conclusions on, it's always best to do the role remediation, the role design right at the front end. So that's just, before we move on to this next topic, I just want to make sure that people really understand that's not kind of the typical role for SIs. A lot of SIs, if they're going to do some role customization as part of the project, it's going to be thin, it's going to be light, it's not going to be fully baked into the project plan, and there may not even be the budget or timeline in the project to do most of the work that needs to be done. As Adil pointed out, it's a lot more work to go through the change control process, and it's a lot more cost in the long run. So just keep that as kind of that's what we consider like a systemic challenge in the SI industry, is they're not always transparent about the breadth of work that needs to be done to do the roles properly prior to going live. And that kind of leads us to this next topic, which is insider threats. Insider threats are people that have access to something within an organization, ultimately, that they shouldn't have access to, or it could be that they have authorized access to something and they still pose a threat. So the way I always think about this, and I'll break this into 2 buckets. I'll talk about authorized users, then I'll talk about unauthorized users subsequent. But just because you have users that are authorized and you can verify that the access they have is what's intended, doesn't mean you don't have to have controls in and around them. So the obvious thing that probably most people understand in the context, the thing people like to talk about a lot is fraud risk and vendor master maintenance. So you could have a vendor master team, for example, that has end user access to be able to enter and maintain vendors on the front end, and there's kind of 2 different flavors of how controls were implemented based upon either workflow process or based upon a manual review of the audit logs related to vendor master maintenance. So those are 2 different types of controls. In some cases, both a workflow-based process of onboarding suppliers and validating the data and a manual process is implemented or allowed within an application. So it could be that your primary objective is to have suppliers set themselves up or go through, provide the initial data for them, and then they're giving you, like the W-9 and bank account information on top of that. And there may need to be some vendors that need to be set up manually. And so you have a vendor master team that also has the ability to enter and maintain vendors apart from what happens in the workflow. If that's the case, then you really have two different set of risks and two different set of controls that have to be in place. And management may only look at this as one risk, but there's really two different processes that have to be managed separately. One would be validating the workflow design process and making sure that doesn't change if it's deemed to be effective from a design perspective. And it's also then validating the data entry that needs to be that is done manually through the applications by the vendor master group. So you have some insider threats there, and that's, I don't know if everybody saw kind of the article this last week that came out from the Justice Department on the fraud committed at Amazon, but it was a fairly complex set of activities. It wasn't like one thing they did to be able to steal from Amazon. It was a significant amount of money. So ultimately, controls when you're designing things in around like vendor master maintenance, preventing fraudulent vendors, or trying to prevent unauthorized access to current vendors or unauthorized changes to current vendors. It's a series of complex controls. That access controls are a part of that. It's a very critical part of it, but you have to make sure logging is enabled. You have to make sure logging is never disabled. And then you have to make sure that the both workflow processes and the manual updates of those activities are also viewed as a risk and have a separate set of controls. Now, another topic on vendor master maintenance is all the modern SaaS systems. They have integration abilities with other applications. So that's the benefit of like the modern SaaS platform. And modern systems in general, as they come pre-built to be able to do integrations with other ERP systems, whether it's off-the-shelf systems or custom systems within an organization. So they also come with APIs and web services and other ability to do back-end or mass updates to data, and that poses another set of risks altogether. So having said that, then our insider threat, we may have a group of users that have authorized access to all these activities, but yet you still need to manage the risk even within that group. You can't just blatantly accept the risk. That's what Amazon did with their vendor master team, and they end up getting bitten to the extent of several tens of millions of dollars, I think it was, in that fraud. And then there's one other scenario, like I want to present on insider threats before we get onto the external threats in the next section. And insider threats, another activity that's performed on a regular basis is the mass update of either supplier data, bank account data, suppliers itself, or maybe invoices, and that's through what we call import processes, or specifically within ERP Cloud as FBDI import abilities. Those things are used by the SIs as part of the implementation, so they're used primarily for conversions. They can also be used to do manual interfaces of data on an ongoing basis, like maybe you're bringing on another company, you need to convert another series of suppliers, both the supplier and the supplier bank account, or maybe you don't have an integration set up with a major vendor, and they're sending you spreadsheet invoices via spreadsheets that need to be uploaded. Those you have to think about and treat as a separate risk. Controls can be put in place, and that's part of what we do with clients, is we help make sure that that type of control is put in place as well. So insider threats, I talked about, those are authorized users. Obviously, unauthorized users as insider threats would be anybody else within the organization that has access to be able to do something that they shouldn't. And that's where it's important to have a tool to be able to evaluate that, and good content that can evaluate the risks completely. So across those categories, like FPDI privileges, APIs, web services, end user UI, user interface type privileges, and that's what we do, with using a product like SafePaaS. So it's a great summary slide here. There are a lot of good information on the average cost of insider threats or fraud. And I guess I haven't really talked much about contractors, but you can appreciate the fact that insider threats are also people that have quote unquote access within the organization, that may be contractors or consultants, and I could probably talk about that for another half an hour. So I'm going to let Adil talk a little bit about how SafePaaS helps address these topics within their platform.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, earlier, that SafePaaS in the introduction, the SafePaaS is really an enterprise end-to-end identity lifecycle management solution, right? So we govern insider, external threats, and all that, whether they're coming in through registration process as third-party vendors, or they're your inside, standard employee getting onboarded through an onboarding process like an ITSM system like ServiceNow or whatever that might be. So we're going to talk about a couple of controls that we have in SafePaaS that help you mitigate that threat. And it's really timely because the Amazon example is very fresh in my mind, but I think we're seeing in general, as companies are concerned about recessions, they're having, especially in the tech industry, some layoffs that we've all read about. Those are some of the symptoms or the trends that we have seen for many decades, where insider threat just goes up. So if you haven't been thinking a lot about it and you're concerned about it, this would be a good time to talk to Jeff and really dig into this topic on what he can do to help you, really prevent, something that is not just a fraud, but also reputational risk and stuff like that gets out in the public. For example, we did another webinar with higher ed folks. So for example, Yale University had a situation last year around this time where it was not as complex as the Amazon issue, but it was more about just taking, the simple procure to pay cycle and not having any basic controls on, who can create purchase orders and approve them and receive merchandise. I think Jeff touched on that briefly. So you see, like, silly controls, us being controls folks, it seems to us like obviously some basic controls are missing in some very prestigious, places that you will think of as very high reputational organizations, right? So yeah, so what we help you do is a couple of controls. I'll come back to this slide. One of them is to just monitor your activity and get the managers to certify, because as our organizations are becoming post-COVID more agile, more hybrid, we have this digital transformation that's going on in the tech world, where everything is going on the cloud. And today's topic is about Oracle ERP Cloud. So many of you that are using cloud. Cloud does not include all your identities, right? Oracle ERP Cloud will have majority of your identities, but we also get involved with customers that are running Oracle Cloud infrastructure. They're doing some extensions, they're doing interfaces. So there's many different ways the data slides into your organization, and that can become a red flag if it's not managed properly through identities, right? So the first one then again is very similar to the last one I covered already, that we have this technology called Data Probe. It can take the snapshot of your identity across your enterprise, whether you're using Azure for authentication, Okta, or whatever you may be using, and then from there, using an ITSM system like ServiceNow, Remedy, to let users come in and request access, and then using Cloud ERP or Workday or some other ERP system to conduct those transactions in CRM, let's say Salesforce. So all these systems, so now you have this, a hybrid environment, and now you want to orchestrate governance across this enterprise. So to do that, you really have to take an end-to-end enterprise-wide approach. You can't do it in silos because one silo doesn't track what the next silo is doing. In other words, your Azure doesn't have all the information your Cloud ERP does, but you're using both systems to rely on it. So it becomes a couple of problems happen, right? One of them is that you have that friction in the process itself, a bottleneck in the process. So even for your normal course of business, you have a friction. We'll talk about it a little later. But most importantly, you have a potential risk of finding in your audit, because what I've seen many times our customers are reporting that, well, in Azure, this user has, these privileges and registration about the role, and what they have in ServiceNow is a catalog, which is an abstract version of what's in Cloud ERP. And Cloud ERP has all these detailed privileges. So how do I certify this, right? I have 3 different systems. That's a typical example that we see among our enterprise customers. They have an IDM system, an ITSM system, and an ERP system. And all of these carry pieces of the identity information. So where do you start? So what we do at SafePaaS is we're able to combine all that into a common metadata, if you will, and then assign reviewers and approvers that will review that access on a periodic basis. Most of our customers do on a quarterly basis. If there are multiple applications, it becomes even more challenging because they have to use a lot of manual labor to do all this, coalesce reports, send out spreadsheets, and verify access. And spreadsheets are 90% incorrect in my experience, and what the analysts are saying that have done research on this. So they end up pulling their hair out, and it becomes a very costly, error-prone process. So what SafePaaS does is, because it automates the process through data probe ETL, it brings in data from across the board. It creates an identity hub in that first swim lane. The second swim lane, it assigns users and approvers who can review that access. So there's intelligent assignment we have built. A lot of AI and machine learning is coming to the market now. So we're able to now sense that who approved this user access in ITSM, or who is the manager of a person in your IDM system. So you don't have to do all that manual work anymore. There's technology like SafePaaS now that does that for you. It creates that whole hub, a 360-degree view of your organization identities across the board, and then it automatically sends out the request to the managers, to their direct staff, to verify that. And the staff can then the manager can go in and basically review the access. Again, they can, if they're more familiar with the, let's say, a ServiceNow catalog name called, let's say, procurement manager, which let's say translates into 2 or 3 roles in Cloud ERP, they can see the details, what's in Cloud. They can also see right next to it what's in ServiceNow catalog, and they can do their job more confidently. Because one of the complaints, symptom of the problem is that customers will come to us and say, we just can't get our people to certify the access. And I'm like, well, they're good people. They want to do the right thing. Why aren't they doing that? And 9 out of 10 times, it turns out to be that what we're asking them to certify, they don't understand, right? So by taking this 360 view, we're able to provide them much more enriched data across the enterprise, and then they can easily certify that, or, for example, change the access, or to provide justification for termination of access. So the remediation effort then is also very important, right? So there's one thing for a manager to say that, oh yeah, this action needs to be, that this person doesn't need access anymore, but it's another to actually make sure that happens. So we have the ability to go into your provisioning or deprovisioning systems and log tickets, requests, whatever your API is. We support all the major APIs in on-premise and cloud infrastructure and formats like JSON, XML, CSV, and all those. So we're able to communicate through messaging using REST, SOAP, and all that into your target systems. Or you can use SafePaaS itself if you have a single business unit, right? Within SafePaaS, you can connect through API directly to Cloud ERP, and we'll deprovision that user role from that user, deassign it or deprovision it, so that you don't have to do any manual work. And that ensures that you are in sync between what's in your provisioning system and what's in your ERP system. And that's a control that's being tested more often than I've seen in the past few years, especially with folks working in multiple environments and multiple cloud environments and so forth. So that's that last swim lane. It basically provides that ITSM, IDM, IGA, whatever you call your provisioning systems. And then the folks that are right now running around chasing spreadsheets and emails can really focus on more strategic insight, looking at dashboards in SafePaaS to see where we are relative to our compliance requirements for the quarter. How is our ERP operating in terms of identities versus our user population requests that are coming in. So yeah, that's basically how we streamline. Again, from an ROI perspective, you know, it takes out thousands of hours of managers' time. So if you have, you know, 10,000 managers, they're each spending 4 hours a quarter. Just add the number, and you know, and then add some friction to that number that goes on back and forth between the compliance group and the managers. So yeah, it's a significant saving, and this is bubbling up as the top a trend in our solution demand this year.
Next threat, seeded roles. Jeff?
All right. Yep, thanks. We've covered like quite a bit of this already in the first couple topics, but I want to just recap a few other things maybe we haven't talked about yet. The number one reason, yeah, audit findings are poorly designed roles stemming from seeded roles. Adil alluded earlier to the aggregation of roles, or the role inheritance component and the complexity of the roles, and how the SafePaaS gives you the visibility to be able to see all the areas within a role that a particular privilege can be derived from, and that's really a significant part of the remediation. And so the challenge is the getting visibility to that, of all the areas where a privilege needs to be pulled out of a seeded role, is a pretty significant challenge in of itself. So I wanted to highlight that part of the technology that was really critical. And what we're seeing in the market is a lot of what we call partially customized roles, or what we refer to as hybrid roles, which is a custom role with a lot of seeded components related to it, so like seeded duty roles, or maybe even still some job role inheritance from other roles, versus what we typically do in our engagements and what we have in our roles library that we deploy as ERP Armor roles to accelerate remediation. We have what we call fully customized roles, which is every component of that role, even down to the duty roles, are copied over and customized. And the benefit of that is it inoculates those roles from being updated during the patch process. And in the process of doing that customization, we obviously also pull out the things that should not be in those roles. So like APIs, web services, and FBDI privileges, the ability to import files, and some other things that would not be applicable. Like we find in end user roles, many end user roles have the ability to do profile option changes or descriptive flex field configuration changes. So there's configuration activities within those roles. So that's where a lot of these audit findings are stemming from. It's not just that end users get access to end user activities that should have access to, like transactions or certain master data, but they have a lot of configuration ability as well. And what that leads to is the IT auditors asking the question, did they do anything with this activity? So they really are forcing management to do look back procedures, which then means you really have to have a comprehensive monitoring of the activities that should be subject to the change control process. So that's enabling and monitoring audit logs, so audit policies. And there's a lot of great audit policies that Oracle has. There's definitely some gaps in the abilities that can be solved through the SafePaaS platform. And then there are some cases where there are some known bugs related to that. So seeded roles do cause a lot of issues. It's interesting to me, the evolution of Sarbanes-Oxley, that like we haven't seen more audit findings over the years due to excessive access that are created by either seeded roles or poor role design. But we're certainly seeing more of that. These are things, frankly, I expected to see in 2006, 2007, and now, unfortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they're just now getting more visibility into the audit programs of the external auditors. Partially because I would like to say that I've personally trained the PCOB a few times, and a big part of that training has been trying to give them an understanding of the risks in seeded roles and how that ties into change management, how to audit the change management process as a whole. So the last thing on here, I think I haven't said this specifically, but say roles do work for their intended use, and that's the challenge is that SIs, they say you should just use the seated roles. And if they can get a client through a project using seated roles, because they are provisioned according to what they should do, generally speaking. So they are provisioned for their intended use, but they are massively over provisioned with sensitive access risks that are not appropriate for end users. So I'm going to move on and let Adil make some comments on this topic.
Yeah, so we have, again, Jeff raises really good points around what you can do to improve your business, and I'm going to talk more from how we can automate and make it more sustainable. So right on, Jeff. I mean, seated roles are not to be used. We have been saying that for 20 years, and I think it's with cloud, with time to market pressures, customers have to go up and running fast. It's becoming a much bigger problem. Both with enterprise customers and even SMEs that are looking to just cut cost with the digital transformation. And so unfortunately, what they're missing is this ongoing burden of correcting the roles. And it's a lot harder to change the engine when the car is running. So please get together with Jeff and help him, help your organization get this right, because it's a much harder problem to solve and much more costly. I've seen as much as 10x in cost to go up when we ask customers to do that after they're live, because now you're going to disrupt the business. There's impact on your supply chain, your customers, your employees. So it's always better to get it in, but with various pressures, it's not always possible. I understand. So yeah, we work, we educate, our SI partners in the communities out there, and there are different levels of skill sets and so forth. So that's a key question to ask. Where SafePaaS can help you is that part I was talking about, is reduce that timeline of correction, right? So let's say you find you have 400 roles, and I'm going to use an example of a customer we were just talking to this week. They did have 400 roles, and they're going to roll out that same business unit. So they roll out in one business unit in a certain market, and now they're moving another business to the cloud. And as they do that, they have obviously a few changes, and they found that the roles that are in one BU is not going to work in the other. And that's a common occurrence even back in the EBS days, on-premise days, that you build with good intentions. So even though you've customized roles, they're not working for another business unit, or you've added a different set of modules, and they just don't have the bandwidth or the resources or the budget to get it all done manually, right? Even though they intend to do what Jeff's talking about, is not use the custom roles. But as Jeff said, it's not in the SI budget, a system integrator that's helping you implement the product. It's not in their budget, it's on your budget. So you've got to figure out a way to get that done without going to the board or the CFO and getting your heads handed to you for screwing up the budget. So that's where SafePaaS comes in. So what they're doing is we're giving them a 90-day access to try out, which will help them get through it. And then as a sustainable solution, they'll continue to use it. So our customers get evaluation period where they can use these tools, especially for roles redesign. And I think we have some offers at the end of this presentation. So basically, it helps you simulate that. It generates the role. It also can, if you would like, they can also be configured to actually deploy that role into the ERP system through our data probe technologies, that green swim lane, the third swim lane you see here. And as a result, you can catch, what's very hard to do is the inherited risk, right? Because of this inherited concept in cloud ERP, you think you're solving a problem in the role, but because it's inheriting something from another role, that can screw you up, right? And so that creates a lot of frustration, delays the projects, and it impacts your overall go live, because if you are being audited by a proper audit firm, they will stop this from going into production, and your burn rate is going to, be significantly impacted. So I don't want to bring bad news. I want to give you some good news. Good news is that you can go in there and simulate that, and what you take 6 weeks to do, you can do it in a few hours and get that project off your back, right? And then later on, once you're live, up and running, Oracle's going to apply those patches every quarter, and your roles are going to change. Every quarter there's new privileges coming in. It's still coming, even though it's been around for 2015 since we got involved with it. the Oracle Cloud ERP. It still has bits and pieces that are not strong enough to, or there are new features that our customers are coming in. So, all of that stuff is coming every quarter, and we can help you avoid that overhead or cost of ownership by simulating as changes come in into a non-prod environment and correcting those issues at the inherent risk level, which is where it all starts, and then move that into assignment of users and roles. So yeah, it's a great simulation tool. Reach out to us if you want to use it. Jeff can guide you through the process.
Can I just mention that we just have 10 minutes left? So our next top threat is ineffective provisioning.
Yeah, I'll be quick on this one. ERP Cloud does allow for some kind of backdoor ways of provisioning. One is the delegation of roles from if a user has certain roles assigned to them and they're flagged as delegable, they can allow other people to have access to that role as well. It essentially bypasses the workflow approval, the provisioning process. And then there's impersonation as well. And that's similar to managed proxies and EBS. This is something we should be looking out for. Go ahead, move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so I'll be brief as well. So I think I mentioned earlier there were two controls I was going to cover. So the certification control, I talked quite a bit about this already, but this is that other control, which is the overall lifecycle management aspect of it. So we were talking a little bit about how customers are using different systems to provision and the basic identity into your environment, and then ultimately flows into your cloud ERP, which is a topic of the day, through some sort of an ITSM, IGA system. So you may be using one of these systems that's in the first swim lane. We connect with all of them because they all are modern systems that support APIs. So we have a hub on the SafePaaS side. That hub that we talked about in the previous automation around certification also can be used for lifecycle management. By lifecycle management, what I mean is users can directly or indirectly through an ITSM system request access to a role within Cloud ERP or Salesforce or Workday, whatever systems you have in the cloud or on-premise. And it will do the analysis on the fly. It will simulate, just like I talked about the roles manager that simulates the role. This will simulate the user request against the combination of roles. So the first example was, okay, within the role, do I have any conflicts? This will be across the roles. We call that inter-role conflicts, right? So let's say you're requesting purchasing and you're requesting payables, and now that gives you a conflict that you can create suppliers and pay suppliers, right? So this will flag those risks to you. It will also send it to your manager who's supposed to approve your access up to 5 levels. So you might go to a manager, may go to a process owner. So it's a very flexible workflow. And then once it's approved, let's say you didn't have any risks, you may not want to send it to 5 levels. You may only get to a manager. Manager approves it. It also provisions that Oracle supports these APIs for partners like us, where we can basically provision that straight into Cloud ERP. So even though you may be using a request management system like ServiceNow or SailPoint or IGA system or something else, but it's not necessarily provisioning. There are two gaps, right? It's not provisioning always into the ERP, so that's still a manual, what we call a fulfillment process still manual. So we'll automate that, and then we'll also automate the policy management side of it, right? So they're not checking for the policy violations like the SOD policies, sensitive access policies, other policies. So we'll protect you against those issues, and that's where the treadmill effect comes in. So that's becomes part of your managed service. If you're using one, if you have internal resources, you're going to have people dedicated to help desk doing eyeballing this, unless you use a tool like this, right? And you can add up the numbers and cost and the ROI that SafePaaS brings to the table. We have some tools to help you do that. This tool actually generates the highest ROI from what our customers tell us, even higher than the certification piece, because it eliminates a lot of rework, and it also speeds up the time to market, right? So you're adding 100 users to a new business you've just acquired, or whatever it is, or new module you're deploying. This will streamline all that process, right? So not only the cost of entry, but also the cost of ownership.
And our top threat number 5, configuration changes.
Configuration changes. Yeah, I mentioned a few of these already. Just the challenge of making sure that anything that goes through change control does go through change control and is tracked. And the challenge really is you got to make sure audit policies are enabled and understand how to review the data. We actually have a training class on this topic that Donna has put together and maintains on an ongoing basis. So if organizations want to have good overall understanding of how to deploy audit policies and look at the audit logs and information is available in seeded reports, they could contact us on this topic. Lots of gaps for sure, but certainly what's available at Oracle should be deployed.
Do you want to say anything else, Jeff, or are you done?
No, I'm done. Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think audit's a great place to start. The challenge is with audit right now, it's scattered. And so when auditors actually want to use that, they have to go through lots of reports and all, and you can build custom reports on top of it to consolidate, but obviously it's cost to it. So what we have done is the ability to integrate with Cloud ERP we pull in all that audit tables, or if you, let's say there are gaps and it's something really important like releasing invoice holds or something that I ran into a few months ago for clients. We also have the ability to do continuous snapshotting. You can set the frequency, and so what we can do is provide that change tracking capability around key changes. So we'll go through all those objects that Jeff has talked about. We can set them up in SafePaaS, whether it's audit enabled or it's a non-audit auditable item. We can still take frequent snapshots based on, let's say, time that you decide based on your control frequency. And then we bring that data in through Data Probe, again, our ETL tool that I keep talking about, really useful for customers. So you bring that data in, and then you have what's called Monitor Pass that basically provides the whole closed loop workflow. And that's what's missing with audit right now, that our customers are coming to us with requiring this kind of monitoring. They want to be able to say, okay, I had an incident, somebody changed the AP terms, what did we do about it? What did our payables process owner do about it? And what are we going to do to prevent it, right? So those kinds of audit findings are still happening, even with the audit capability, which is great. We didn't have that in the on-premise world unless we turned on the whole database audit, which nobody did. So yeah, you have some really good capabilities, but to take full advantage of it, again, you want to get away from as much manual and make it more self-service. So what we do is we create an incident log that auditors can come in and review that incident log, and they'll see who treated this risk. So AP terms, who changed it, who was this requester, who requested the change, who approved the change, who then completed that change. Or let's say there's a ticketing system again. ServiceNow is a good example again, or Remedy, or others. The Jira, we use that as well. So let's say your ticket number, you want to tie that ticket number to that change. So your auditors can say, okay, yes, I can verify now that what's in my ticketing system for requesting that change matches with the change that was requested. So, it's the level of detail that we won't have time to cover here, but if you want to dig into it, I know we're out of time. That's the kind of stuff we can talk to you about on how you can really reduce the risks and headaches of managing controls and governing Oracle Cloud ERP better. I'll end with that. Emma, back to you.
Great. Okay, we do have a few slides that we've added at the end. Do you want to go over these, Jeff and Donna?
Sure. If people don't mind staying on for a few minutes, would love to have Donna do some updates for the attendees related to what we're seeing in 23A.
I'll go quick. Hopefully just 5 minutes. So 23A, great, is one of the bigger patches, I think, for what they've updated for the users, as far as I'm concerned. They've added some stuff to the transaction console. So if you haven't used the transaction console, let us know. We've been more than happy to show you some of the things that it can do. But they've given you the opportunity to allow your users to have access to see what's happening in workflow, to see what's stuck, what things that have you can look at. They don't have the ability, don't have to have the ability to stop things or push things through or withdraw or reassign. but they can just view things if they need to. So we have access to that. So they've added some different things that you can do now. You can show that when the archive is necessary. Go on to the next one. You can also resend approval notifications. So if something's been sitting around for a little while and the notification's been stuck in someone's email and is dropped down through the email for a while, you can resend that email notification to get that going again. That hasn't been available before, so now it is. Go ahead to the next one. They've also added some new privileges. These are not part of the READMEs. So unless you did an analysis of the privileges that came in, you would not see these. So some of these that are coming in for the IT security manager, two of these that are huge that we're really excited about is update password for user account and lock and unlock user account, the first and the third. Those will give you the ability to have a help desk type of a custom role to give someone access to update passwords for users and lock and unlock users without having access to provision the user. Currently, before 23A, you would have to have the ability to edit a user, which would give them access to provision, update usernames, all kinds of edit capability that you don't want someone to have just to be able to lock, unlock, or change a password. So now you don't have that. Now you can grant these two privileges to someone and they can just reset passwords and just unlock users if they get locked out. So that's a great thing to be able to do. They're starting to enable two-factor authentication for users. So we think it's a future thing that's coming in because we can't find where this exactly is utilized yet. So we think they're starting to put things in place for a future, possible future functionality. Go on. So this is the help desk role that I was kind of telling you about. It just gives them access to lock, unlock, and reset. My little square kind of got out of place there. But so it doesn't give them access to everything. If you open up the next slide, it'll show that you can't edit the role, edit for the user. All you can do is reset the password if you actually opened up the role. So it's kind of, or the user, it's kind of nice to be able to do that. So go on to the next one. Trying to go fast. I apologize if I'm going too fast. Two new privileges that came out is we've been talking to Oracle quite a bit about FBDI access when you do imports, being able to import things and pull in FBDI. So now they've created in the GL area two different privileges, post subledger journal entry without the import access for FBDI, and run import journals program without the FBDI access. So now we can grant these two privileges to your accountants to be able to do these processes and they don't pull in access for the FBDI. So this is huge that we've been waiting for this. And so we're really excited that they finally gave us this access. So these are great. They're not currently in any role. They're just privileges that are out there. So you would have to customize and put them in roles. The roles that seated roles that they're currently have the other privileges that do allow the import access for FBDI. So you'd have to customize to put these in place. Is there another one? Oh, okay, and one more that came in that is not in a README that we were a little concerned about. Back up just, it's a privilege that is in the accounts payable supervisor and the accounts payable payment supervisor. Is the allow payments with insufficient funds. This will allow creation of payments when funds are not available. So it's come in your seated. So if you're using seated roles, you have access to this after 23A. Your people will be able to create a payment when the funds are not available. So that's kind of worrisome to me. We're probably not going to put this privilege in any of our custom roles unless somebody really wants it. But it's currently available in these two seated roles. So go ahead, next one. And I think I let this one, I'll pass this on to Jeff.
Yeah, that was great insight there, Donna. So yeah, do you want to talk through this, Jeff?
No, go ahead, Emma. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say for all our attendees and our registrants today, we are offering until March 31st examples of risks in two seated roles and two custom roles, along with access to SafePaaS Roles Manager. So if anybody is interested in this offer, then please reach out either to myself or to Jeff, and we'll be happy to discuss the offer with you in more detail. And Jeff and Donna and I are always available for a one-on-one discussion. So if anybody needs any further information about what you've heard today, then don't hesitate to reach out. Any closing words from you, Jeff, Donna?
No, we appreciate you guys' time and look forward to hearing back from anybody if they have any questions.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Do you have a slide with our emails?
Yes. It's the last one.
Okay,
So a
great.
big thank you to everyone for attending today, and of course to our speakers, Jeff, Donna, and Adil, who's had to drop off for another call, for their expert insight as always. So thank you to everybody and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.